I heard a rumor that many of you have been losing sleep at night because you've been wondering, do I, Rich the Lich, use Encumbrance? The simple answer to the title of this video is no, I don't. To each their own, I just simply don't. In the player's handbook, there is a variant rule on Encumbrance if you want to get into the nuance and the crunch and the nitty-gritty of those details. There's no really massively heavy, impactful reason or anything like that why. I just simply don't. It's just a layer of detail that I don't need for my games. But although I don't track Encumbrance, and I don't track them having to pay for each arrow or each bundle of arrows, we use common sense. You don't just walk into a town and tell me, hey, since we're not tracking arrows, I've got 600. Okay, is that cool? No, you don't have 600. No, you're not carrying 6 suits of plate mail armor. So that's the benefit of me not doing that, not tracking that, is it just gives another thing my players do not have to worry about, which allows them to focus on other things. Now, where does Encumbrance hold value? Well, when you track Encumbrance, per the variant rule, let's say here. So the rules for lifting and carrying are intentionally simple. Here's a variant if you're looking for more detailed rules for determining how a character is hindered by the weight of equipment. When you use this variant, ignore the strength column of the armor table. If you carry weight in excess of 5 times your strength core, you are encumbered, which means your speed drops by 10 feet. If you carry weight in excess of 10 times your strength score, up to your maximum carrying capacity, you are instead heavily encumbered, which means your speed drops by 20 feet and you have disadvantage on ability checks, attack roll. That's harsh. But you now need to track the weight of every single thing, right? The benefit of doing that is it puts more value on things such as a bag of holding. It puts value on maybe your own magical item creations that might minimize the rules of Encumbrance, that might allow you to, a special sword that weighs close to nothing, yet it's still a great sword. But it's made of, what is Captain America's vibranium? So it's never going to break. It's extra durable, but it weighs a pound, right? It puts value on things like that. But the other thing, and you always want to think through this, where you never want to have a blank statement of, don't use this, but use this variant. Don't use feats, but then use feats. Don't use variant human, but then use human. Don't use Encumbrance, but then use Encumbrance. You need to consider the game that you're playing, the style, the theme, the vibe of it. And what I mean by that is imagine a game like the survival ones, right? Like PUBG or Dead by Daylight, Dark Souls. Imagine if you had unlimited ammo in games like that. Okay, imagine if you had Bastion from Overwatch in a game like a Bloodborne. Yes, I know we're talking different genres and technology levels of technology, but you get where I'm going, right? Is when you want to create that element, right? Like a Walking Dead feeling, an element of horror, an element of grit and grime, like a Van Helsing or a Strahd Ravenloft feeling. You need to, in order to have that element of horror really take hold, you need to reduce options. Your players don't have a way out, right? One thing that happened in a game like World of Warcraft is the moment mounts went vertical, it changed the scale and the scope of the game tremendously. I know this from a game design perspective and people that I know that have worked on the game. About them, it changed it from a programming and graphical standpoint because now they had to render the tops of the buildings a little more, right? You know what I mean? Things like that, because now you're getting to scale. So you have to be careful with having this blank statement of it never fits in all cases, because if you're trying to have Encumbrance and the weight of something and minimal rations, and the PCs are only able to find one, not each PC, as a party, one length of 50-foot rope. When that is all the group has, 60 feet of climbing becomes a little more precarious. Crossing a chasm when you don't have pitons, right? You don't have grappling hooks. It's no different than how deadly verticality is, and spaces at higher levels, and goblins that are shooting from 200 feet away when your PCs do not have the ability to fly or teleport. It's how dangerous overland travel is, and the amount of random encounters they may run into, and the amount of, or the lack, I should say, of long rest they're going to get if they need to cover 300 miles of distance and they do not have access to any horses, any mounts at all, and they're going through difficult terrain, swampland or something like this, right? So there's never a blank statement. So where does variant rules for encumbrance really shine? When you want to kind of create that Bloodborne feel, when you want to create a game where you're not just creating detail and crunch of using variant encumbrance just because. You're creating that when the fact that carrying in excess of your strength score makes you slower matters, because you're always on the run. If you're always having to get away, everything you find now adds a whole nother layer of nuance and depth and options and discussion, because you want that suit of plate mail, the extra suit. You're already wearing one. You want that. It's worth money. It needs to be reforged or fixed so that it enables you to have its full AC value, right? Maybe the DM comes up with a kind of a variant rule on that, so to speak, on the quality of equipment. But you want to carry that. But as you start to go through this area where everything in the area is more powerful than you, all the CR of all the monsters is double, triple the average CR of the party, you're in a very survival mode. So you're going to be hesitant to pick up everything you find. You're going to have just enough arrows, but you dare not run out of arrows. But what's too much? Because what happens if you have a fallen companion? Who carries that individual? Do you now have to be careful with everyone in the party playing half-orcs and Goliaths that are 350 pounds? Because if you have a party makeup of gnomes and halflings, and then a bugbear and a Goliath and a dragonborn, if those three bigger characters fall, the halfling and gnome most likely aren't going to be able to carry those individuals. So notice when you're playing in a game where you're always on the run, the DM presents it that way. You're in a very Walking Dead-esque style where the enemies are relentless. They don't stop. You need to move, and you need to move quickly. You need to always be on your toes. You need to conserve. That is where things like variant encumbrance shine. So it's not just randomly choosing, I want to add more layers of detail and pick this variant, that variant, this variant. Always consider the game you're playing, and if that helps to create the ambiance and the theme and the tone of the adventure or the campaign or whatever it is that you're running. So the long answer is I do not currently, and I have not for any of my campaigns, used encumbrance. But like with my upcoming Silberat world, each of my nations have their own sort of rules associated with them, because that's what drives the theme and tone of that nation, right? That's what makes you as sort of a reminder that we're we're not in Kansas anymore. We're clearly in the nation of Barenheim, not in the nation of Prowen, because when we're in Barenheim, these following variant rules are always in play. And they are problematic. We cannot wait to leave, because instead of having a variant rule that persists through my whole campaign, it persists per region and zone. So it screams to the players where they are. So there is no absolute, this rule always works in this game, and it works at every table, and I should never use it. I've never used them so far, but I'm definitely considering them, and that's probably why I made the video, so I can talk myself into the use of encumbrance rules. But also be careful with getting too heavy-handed with it. If there's enough grit, grime, depression, and a lot of strikes against the players, just adding in a layer of encumbrance might be too much, where now your players are not having fun anymore. Because at its core, 5e, the system, is kind of designed as a very high fantasy world. But we'll see how the likes of Dark Sun and Silberat squeeze into the play space. That's all I have for you folks. I'll see you in the next video.